Address too.
Hi, Mandarin.
Hi Anna, how are you?
I'm really well. Thank you so much for agreeing to do the interview. And straight away, I'm really fascinated by this work of art behind me that you've done because I know you as a photographer because you were working with Duran. I can't remember which year it was now. Can you remember?
Well, there's been a few actually, but the one that I think you might be referring to is 2012, which seems so long ago now. A lot's happened, that's for sure. So back in the good old days.
No, it's a long time ago. The time can
Yeah.
fly, can't it? That was a really wonderful
Yeah.
experience. That was was it in Melbourne or did you travel to a different part of Australia? I can't remember.
Traveled. So I shot with the band in Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, and the Hunter Valley. I missed out Perth because I had another shoot on, and Brisbane I didn't do. So
That's right, you
it
came
was
all
marvelous.
over. Yeah, and I know from having had a quick look at your website that yes, there's quite a lot of fine art there, which is a surprise to me. It's wonderful. As I said, I know you as a photographer. So where would you like? Well, let's start with this work of art because it's wonderful. Can you tell us about this? Because I know it's on the cover of your website, which is I think it's just mandarinmontgomery.com. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
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 So tell us this. I'm just going to move my head out of the way.
Well, that actually, we've had such a crazy few years, especially in Australia, well, all around the world. But that one was inspired by, we had some absolutely intense bushfires, droughts, as we often do in Australia. And I'm a very conceptual photographer in my fine art photography. So it was kind of a statement on,
Here I am again. I know.
oh God, that's so funny. It was kind of a statement on, where we were at that time because we were going through some severe bushfires in Australia at that time, and I titled that "Waiting for the Rain." So in the image, which is now hidden behind you,
All
there's
right,
some
I'm going
little
to go up
people.
again then. Although maybe I didn't mean it to turn into a comic, but it probably will. But it's just the quickest way, I think. Going up.
So
All right,
it
so go
might
ahead.
be
We can
hard to
talk about it. I hope I've
see.
got most of it in.
You have just behind that circular thing, which is actually a life raft. There's some people sitting around, almost like a campfire, but they're literally waiting for the rain, and it's sort of an allegorical, almost cartoon, surreal image to sort of depict their sort of they've pulled this cloud into their space so that they can get some rain because the landscape is so parched. And I actually photographed that main landscape before I did that weird liquefy to it in a beautiful part of Australia called Kangaroo Island, which is off the
Ooh.
coast of South Australia.
Uh-huh.
And it was extraordinary landscape that was extremely parched and dry. And so it was a bit of labor of love. And it actually received an incredible award that I was really very proud of, very honoured. And at the Australian Professional Photography Awards, it scored the highest scoring print. It received 97 out of 100.
Oh
So
my
I won
goodness.
a perpetual trophy called the Ilford Trophy. So Ilford sponsors it, and it's been handed out and passed around each year since I think 1977 or 78. So
I
there's
hope
some.
I'm not doing it a disservice coming in and out of it like this way. I'll see if I can come
No,
to it
not
from
at
the
all, not at all.
side. All right, how about that? So tell us
So yeah.
about yeah. So what is the criteria? I mean, it's an amazing work. As you said, it's photographic art. Is that right?
Yeah,
So
so
tell us how, because I thought it was a painting. So absolutely, it's
no.
an incredible piece of work. How did you go about transforming the photograph, the initial photograph, into this work of art?
So with that image and all the ones that you'll see on that particular page, it starts off generally with a concept. I come up, and where I get my concepts from is a whole other conversation, which we can touch base later on if you want to. But I come up with a concept, and I gather the images out of. I have a vast collection of images in my image stock library that I've photographed. I'd never use anyone else's images except for one image that I can talk about later, which is an old image from an ancient, an old photograph of a person. But generally, I will gather all these images that I have photographed, elements of images, and then I will play around with them in Photoshop and composite them all together. That particular image I also used a texture overlay, which happened to be the parched grass from that landscape. So it was sort of almost a subliminal reiteration of the dryness of the area, and I found that it worked much better in black and white. It had almost a cartoon-like quality. I'm not sure if you're familiar with, there's a very well-known cartoonist that used to do strip cartoons, strip comics in all the newspapers in Australia called Loonig, and a lot of people, Australians, reference, oh, that cloud looks so Loonig like, but my mindset is quite conceptual and often surreal, so it's all about trying to communicate a visual language without words, and it can be very challenging to do that, but it's a very enjoyable.
That sounds fascinating, because as I said, well, I thought we would be talking more about the photography, and then in the 5 minutes I had before I was able to come on, finally get onto my computer, I saw all these wonderful works of photographic art. So I'm going to just see if I can share the screen here, and we can chat about some more. Let's have a look here, because you've said you normally start with the concept, and this is your main page, isn't it, of your website?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we start, yeah, I mean, award-winning work, and then exactly this is the page that I looked at for really about not nearly as long as I mean, just I had to skim it because I knew we were doing the interview. So yeah, I'm just wondering why that tab has come up. Just want to get rid of that. Let's just put that, hopefully that doesn't show on. Anyway, I've moved it on the bottom. So yeah, you've done a few of these in black and white, and I can see the surrealist element. I mean, this reminds me of, I mean, I'm actually sound like I'm an authority, and I'm in no way at all. For some reason, this reminds me of Escher. Do you know, are you familiar with Escher?
Oh, absolutely. And look, I'll take that as the greatest compliment, because his work is extraordinary. It's just you can stare at his work for ages, and the longer you look, the more you just go down this rabbit hole of how did he even come up with the ideas in the
I mean, I
first
know
place.
he conceptualizes with a lot of, from what I remember, with a lot of it's kind of calculations for I mean, I'm thinking of the staircase one, where things don't kind of go where you think they're going to go, do they? They're like there's
No.
something kind of abstract in terms of the calculations of the way that lines work together. But
Yeah.
the thing that actually reminded me of Escher, it was the colors, was the way that you've used the black and white. I don't know when he was around, but I mean, that's just the first person and probably the last surrealist, apart from Dali, that I'll be able to remember. But tell us about, choose one of these. These are outstanding. Mandarine, I had no idea you work in this way as well, because I said I know you from your band photography because of working with Duran. But choose one that you'd like to talk about, and if I click on it, presumably it'll just enlarge, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, there's a couple that I could talk about. I mean, I sort of touched on, I generally always use my own images, but that little guy that is under the Waiting for the Rain image, the one that's I could talk about him, and the one below that as well, the color one,
This
because
one?
yeah, I could briefly sort of
Oops, I can see
uh,
it's gone.
like it all. So all of these images have a concept, and that
One second, let me try and find that one. Oh, there's you. I didn't know what.
yeah, a long time ago.
That's an Alice in Wonderland thing. It looks like reference. Looks one amazing. Okay, so here we are. Wow, this is
Well,
wonderful.
just very briefly with that one, I feel as a creative, and I know that we're both on the same page here. I think you really need to be super creative. Don't just put yourself into a little box and go, oh, I'm only going to look at other photographers. That's one element of it, but it's really cool to look at what painters do, and people who draw, and musicians, and it just surrounding yourself with this sort of creativity. Little things come into your mind, and you're like, oh, okay, how can I relate that to my work?
Absolutely.
There's actually I would call her a digital artist, by the name of Maggie Taylor, who is one of my favorite artists, who actually worked very close with and actually married Jerry Ullsman, who is a photographer, a surrealist photographer, who sort of got me on my journey way back when I was a teenager, because he started back in the day when it was, film and darkroom and printing. He would do with his enlarger what we now do with Photoshop. So he'd have a dozen enlargers set up alongside each other, and he would expose on the paper with one enlarger, and he'd sort of section it off, and then he'd mask it off with things that would cover it over, and then he'd go on to the next enlarger. So he'd build up this image with all these enlargers, which in essence was kind of like a Photoshop, but pre-Photoshop.
Amazing.
So I really adored the work of these surrealists, and I found Maggie Taylor's work, and I really enjoyed her work too. And how she creates her work is she finds these beautiful old lost images that are in your old antique shops, and that's a whole other conversation. That to go into an antique shop and find these exquisite old photographs from 100 or 150
Is that
years
what
ago.
this is?
Yes, the guys, just the man. But that is what got me thinking about this particular image, which is the only image that I've done this idea with. I found this amazing image of this gentleman from 100 plus years ago, and I thought, I wonder what his life was like then. And I thought, you know what? I want to create something that is so out of place. I want to put him in a different time, a different reality. So I want to put him in a futuristic reality. So I gathered a whole lot of images from my catalogue. The rocks, for example, in the background, I photographed in the deserts of America. The little spaceships were, I think I photographed them in Houston. I went to the Space Center there. And there's lots of other elements. The building that he's standing in is a building here in Melbourne. The little monster that he's got next to him, I call a doggle. So that was actually, believe it or not, a police dog I photographed in New York City, and I sort of chopped it in half and created this little monster out of it. So it's a whole story of him living in the future. He's waiting to get on his space shuttle and zoom off. But I love the vintage look of his clothes, and obviously I put a space helmet on him as well. So
that's fascinating, because you said of these futuristic elements, and now as you say it, it's totally, what's so miraculous about this photo is that if you hadn't said that, because he places you, I don't know when it's from, is it from the before the First World War? I don't know how old this photo is, between the First and the Second World War, maybe, I don't know. But
I reckon
because
it's even
he
older.
are even older, right? Yeah, 18th, yeah, okay,
I
19th.
reckon it would be. Yeah.
And because of that, it wasn't immediately apparent that there's a doggle that you've created. I thought that was a dog. So looking closer, I can see that you've made an animal. And yeah, I did notice the spaceship and the architecture is from a different time. Again, you said that's modern. So it's really fascinating how, I don't know if that's because we're drawn towards an image that we identify, that we I know faces are things that people are drawn towards instantly. You can assume that it dates the photograph in that era, and then as I look at everything, there's so many modern, so many things, and then there's this imaginary animal that you've created. So that's wonderful, because there is a real vintage quality to this, and it really plays with your mind, because it isn't vintage, as you've said. It's well, I know you created it very recently, so it's not vintage for that reason. But it was him that puts it in that period of time, and of course everything else isn't. So that's really fascinating, because I wouldn't have noticed that straight away looking at it. That
and that's part of. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, that's part of your.
Well, that's part of what I enjoy, because images now, Anna, are so transient. I mean, we're bombarded with millions of images over the social media, over the internet, everywhere you look. So if you can capture someone's attention for longer than half a millisecond, that's a real success. So I enjoy actually having these, we call them cookies in photography, whereby the longer you look at an image, the more little elements you can see, and the story you gather from the image is actually almost a reflection on your own life experience, because everyone will see an image differently and take from it something related to their own experiences. So that's really part of the journey.
And what would you say that we'll just come back onto that then. Well, yes, as the author of this work, would you say that that's what you want to facilitate in others, I suppose, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to ask you, what do you take from that? If it's always going to be subjective, well, you could say perhaps if there's anything you'd like to share. And I guess I shared with you what I noticed. Which I wouldn't say was necessarily so personal, what I was noticing. I was kind of responding to the technique. But I don't know, is there anything personal in there that you, apart from the process, or is it more about the facilitation? Well, I suppose you've answered already. I don't know.
I think I think for that one, it was about the juxtaposition. I hate to use the word, but of a gentleman that was from a different era, and then putting him in a background that is totally out of place. His feet are actually not human feet either. So if you look at it, he's actually an alien himself. And what is really funny, and I haven't, changed the image of him other than putting that, which was actually a bubble. The space helmet was a bubble. I photographed bubbles on a black background. But actually, if you look at his hands, he's actually giving the viewer the finger.
Oh yeah, just noticed. Have you added that?
No, that was actually how he was photographed. So I think that's quite amusing.
It is. It's fantastic. Let's have a look at. Is there one more? I mean, I'm getting a vintage feel from. Well, I don't want to say the word vintage because that's a huge generalization, but I'm getting a sense of juxtaposition of time. Certainly, with several of these, is some of the same themes going through a few of these? in terms of
Yeah.
time, or like if we look at this one, which was the other one you wanted to talk about?
Well, I was going to say the one below that one you were just talking about,
One?
the guy juggling. Yeah. That was a really important lesson for me, that particular image. Just in my process, and it taught me that really it ain't over until the lady sings, kind of thing. It never give up is what that image taught me. And I guess the story behind that was that I was invited to create an image for a photography event a few years ago. That was going to be auctioned off for charity for Make-A-Wish Australia, which is, for children that have got cancer and are very ill, to offer them, amazing life experiences, which is a really important charity. So it was a huge honor to be invited to do it. However, part of the stipulation was that the whole image had to be created, conceived. Everything had to be shot, put together on the one weekend of this particular event, from start to finish, and then auctioned off. The way I create my images, I often have hundreds of layers that take weeks to put together. I can often have 50 separate elements, separate images that I composite all together in this type of work that I do. So to be able to do that was a huge challenge for me, and I didn't think I would be able to do it. The challenge was, if I didn't do it, then I would be completely embarrassed, and humiliated, not only for myself, but in front of my peers, in front of the sponsors, and also the charity. So to actually do it was a big deal, to say yes. And I can tell you I was very stressed that weekend, but I had the most incredible model, another photographer, Dan O'Day, who's an extraordinary wedding photographer.
This guy that's here?
Yeah, because that was part of the stipulation. It had to be another photographer at the event that I was photographing, and it had to be this particular gentleman. So as I do with all of my conceptual portraits, which this was one, I take a little bit of time to learn about the individual, what makes them tick, what they like, what they don't like, their background, and I somehow formulate an idea, an image that will reflect their personality, who they are, in the way that I see them. And some of those things are easy to portray to the general audience, and some of them are little cookies that particular subject, it might be just for them. So this particular guy said that this actually really portrayed him perfectly, the Jekyll and Hyde type character. And it ended up that I was able to finish it, and we auctioned it off for Make-A-Wish, and raised some nice money for it. So it was
that's
really
fantastic. What a wonderful cause and experience, really. So so that's, as you said, the premise here is Jekyll and Hyde, and is that the analogy with, you said you got that's what you were talking about, part of his character, but also was it to do with the theme of did you say it was people that have cancer?
Well, no, the charity Make-A-Wish, absolutely.
No, you said it was never give up, was the spirit. Was that the spirit? So in this, is it never? So is that conveyed in the choice of hope or despair? How is that? Is that what you're relaying here, or is it more about the character of the photographer?
This one was about the character of the photographer, but in the process of creating this image in the very short space of time I had, and I will say that I had a lot of help from the sponsors. The sponsors printed it. Epson is amazing. They printed it up for me. I had some incredible help from KL Photographics, and Canson, papers. I had a lot of help to put it all together. So it was very much, as well as from Dan, Nikon as well, I had a lot of help. So it was very much a team effort, which I'm forever grateful for. What it taught me, though, was that as a person, as a creative, as a human, if you think something is going to be too hard, don't necessarily say, no, I can't do it. Take a stab, because if you never give up until the very last minute, just keep going, keep at it, because you will get there. And if you don't get there, well, you've learned a really valuable lesson, and you've expanded yourself, and you've gone that extra mile. So that was a really important lesson for me, to learn that I do have the capacity to do things that I didn't think were possible.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. What are you working, before we talk about the photography for bands, because I know you do that a lot as well. I just couldn't resist talking about your artwork when I said the photographic art. But what are you currently working on, Mandarine?
Well, I have a massive catalogue of images that I photographed very recently on a trip to New Zealand. It is so good to be able to travel again, I got to say. In Australia, I think Melbourne, the most lockdown city in the world, and we've got our final restriction lifting mid-October.
What a relief.
So yeah, and look, it's been very hard, because very respectful and very mindful of all the people that have been sick and are still getting quite sick from COVID. So very, fully vaccinated, all of that.
Right, so it's only fairly recently that you're experiencing freedom to roam around, right? Is that what you're saying?
No. Well, no, we've had that for a little while now.
I mean, like traveling further afield.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
It's not that. It certainly doesn't feel that long since we've been able to travel. So yeah, I was very fortunate to be invited to judge an international photography competition in New Zealand. And
wonderful.
I haven't done live judging since COVID. I used to do a lot of it, and mentoring and helping, up and coming photographers, is really a heart project. I really enjoy it. So I've got a big catalogue of images that hopefully I can create some more of this fine art imagery, and also possibly use it in some of my commercial work, i.e. promo shots for bands and that sort of thing, which I have actually done in the past.
So you took a lot of photographs when you went to New Zealand. Is that what you're saying? That you've got a huge library now, that you're so imaginative looking at your photographic artwork, that that, as you said, drawing from all the arts, and not just all the arts, anything can trigger your imagination, and you have a real surrealist underpinning in, I don't know, in all your work, but in a lot of the work that we were looking at then, which I can see. I can see why you would be, any opportunity to photograph as much as possible would be welcomed. So going to New Zealand and having that opportunity, when you are judging, I mean, I suppose, I'm just curious to know, because you've said that you've judged in a few competitions. Presumably they have a particular criteria, but for example, what are you looking for example, in the last competition that you judged? What is it that that you're drawn towards, or do you sometimes feel the limits of the actual competition criteria itself, or are you given a free rein? And what is it that you look for in photographers?
I think, well, I can't overlook the technical aspects of the image. So technically, it needs to be a sound. I'm always drawn to something that is quite creative, and that extra element, because it sort of comes back to, it is really increasingly hard to be creative. Everything's been done before. So
Mm,
how can you do something that goes that extra mile, that's a little bit different, that adds that extra element of curiosity to capture your attention? So if a photograph can do that, and it's technically beautiful, it's composed well, it's detailed beautifully, then that will capture my attention. And it's a journey that I think, regardless of whether you're just beginning on your journey in creativity, whether it's photography or something else, or whether you've been doing it forever,
mm,
it's lifelong. Learning is lifelong.
mm.
So, and we're always moving, and recreating, reinventing ourselves and what we do. And that's important.
All that criteria sounds spot on, and also whether you're a musician or, as you said, regardless of which art you're in, to look outwards and to get inspiration from all sorts of things, to make something slightly different and put your own particular take on it, and back that up with technique, which is what you're saying, and the criteria that you consider when you're actually judging other people's photography, which also sounds fascinating. I want to bring, I mean, I could talk on Mandarin, I could talk to you all day. I'm just looking at your website. I strongly urge anybody, all you creators, look at Mandarin's. It's just a joy to look at from a creative perspective. It's really a joy to look at. I want to quickly, if I can, before we close, as I said, I just feel that we could talk about each image for an hour, I imagine. But I do want to, because I know that we met through Duran. You took some just phenomenal photographs there. I'm curious to know how you were introduced to Duran, and then also let's briefly not necessarily talk about one of those photographs, but I want to share the screen and talk about your music photography, because I know you do also photograph a lot of bands, and we've been talking about your photographic artwork, which I just couldn't resist because it was just so fascinating. So let's just share the screen again, and then pull up the live performance album promo, because this is how I got to meet you in Australia in unbelievably 2012. I remember that this is the one that you shared for the Thursday Creator Taster,
Yeah.
which you did talk about. So you might want to talk about that again, or maybe choose a different one.
Well, I mean, that one was like a great example of using some of the elements in my catalog.
I would say, you know what, I know it's tempting because I just asked you if you wanted to, but because there's a Thursday Creator Taster poster about this, could we choose another one?
Absolutely. Well, do you want to choose one?
Well, I'm drawn. Which are the most recent? I was kind of drawn to this one actually, or I know that
Actually,
there's around.
Tribecaistan, that was a really cool one, actually.
Which one?
So the Tribecaistan, the album cover.
This one, yeah.
Yeah, that was look, it comes back to I think what I have found in the music industry is that it's really about building relationships, and we are, as photographers, we're going into your environment, and it's really important to be very respectful, very humble, because even though musicians, we're all human, but musicians work very hard, and the last thing they need is someone in their face if they don't want them to be. So I really sort of work on sort of building my relationships with these super creatives, and this particular
As are
album that,
you.
pardon?
As are you. I mean, it's very humbling looking at your work. And likewise, I appreciate when you're in the environment with musicians that there's I get that totally, because there's a real subtlety. I remember with all the photographers that Duran have chosen, there's a real subtlety in the approach, the gentleness, and a subtlety because there's a real, because you want to kind of be I can't avoid using the cliche fly on the wall, but you want to facilitate the musician to feel as free as possible, I suppose, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So look, this particular group, I I know, you know, friends of friends. They've become my friends. They're a New York world music group. So they, you know, you go into their home, and which is very, once again, you know, they trust you to go into their home, and they'll have 100 different instruments on their wall that are all quite, don't ask me what instruments they are. I wouldn't know. They're these ancient instruments that they play, and they just pick them up and they go, okay, we're going to use this, or you know, a sitar, or whatever it is. That's the only unusual instrument I can think of. That when I was in New York, well, it feels like a while ago now, they said, can you do an album cover for us? So it was quite spontaneous. They got a beautiful girl as a model, and we
So
actually shot it.
she's not in the band.
No, she's not.
Okay, interesting
But
choice.
we shot it in a corridor. One of the band members, it was very off the cuff. He said, "Look, here's a few scarves," and I said, "Oh, let's use the scarf that's got the dots on it, because it sort of goes with the title." And we had a great time, because I think with this sort of imagery, with shooting bands, and they want to work with people that are talented, but also people that they enjoy working with, because you know, you don't want to work with a-holes. You want to work with people that are good, but people that are fun as well. So we had a lot of fun shooting this, and then I added all the elements afterwards. So those little circles, which are, you know,
Right.
dots, and
You did the whole thing. Because often with
yeah.
photographers, they'll take the photograph and then the whole design and everything. So presumably then you talk through the style and you got a sense of their brand, building the relationship, and so you talk through the whole thing.
So
Or
I
you
did.
left, or did they say, go ahead, let's see what you do. You can do was there free reign, or how did it go?
There was a lot of free reign. What I didn't do was the lettering. They did that, but the actual back of the album, which I don't know whether I've got that on my website, is actually more. Oh, there it is, just next to it. That was also, you know, I wanted her to be like a genie floating in the air. So that none of the lettering is mine, the text, but all the imagery, all the photoshopping, I put together, and
Fantastic.
they gave me free reign, which was really cool.
Fantastic. It's got a kind of the lettering is like slightly, I don't know what the style of the music is like, but for some reason it conjures up like a 70s slightly hippie indie vibe.
Yeah, yeah, which is what they wanted.
Uh-huh.
So,
Fabulous.
yeah.
So let's have it. I know that you did, but well, I also get a slightly surreal vibe from that, which is which is not, in that sense, is not dissimilar to some of the to your criteria with a lot of your photographic artwork. Look at all of these. I mean, these are wonderful. And what is so you've outlined what you feel is important when you're working. That you've really prioritized the importance of the relationship that you build up with the people you're working with. There's the Duran one there, and here's, oh, I remember the ones that you took of me. They're fabulous. So many.
So
And
photogenic.
yeah,
They're
let's just
very
briefly talk. I
photogenic.
mean, you've talked about the layering. I think you did. Can you summarize what you mentioned in the creator taster? Because I know you chose this as the example, because I know it was several weeks ago. It's probably a couple of months ago now. But
Yeah.
what of your skill? What of your methodology and your process do you feel is encapsulated in this? Did you, I presume, did you do the typography as well?
No. That
That's them as well.
the promoter did all that, but all the imagery is mine. So it was it was a beautiful collaboration between David Sterry, who's the central figure there, the lead singer of Real Life, who had a quite a clear idea of what he wanted. So the two keyboardists in the background were very much what he wanted. And then he gave me free rein as far as, you know, how I photographed him. And I thought the guitar was, you know, it was very important because it's quite central to what he does. And the background, the mist, the moon, the stars, the mistiness really related to his work, especially Real Life's new album, which is called Sirens, and it references, you know, spaceman and, you know, outer space and all this sort of, you know, astronomical, you know, surreal type concepts. And I wanted to draw from that in the image that I produced. And we sort of collaborated. He had some ideas on how he wanted it to look. And I gave him a couple of different options, a black and white, this version, a sort of a more colored version. He was quite inspired by a David Bowie image from a while back that had sort of quite warm orangey tones. So he really sort of settled on this as the one he liked the best. So yeah, it was absolute joy. We had a great time in the studio. So yeah, it was really fun.
Brilliant. Mandarin, as I said, we could just keep chatting. I could keep chatting with you for the rest of the day because just really the amount of thought and technique and imagination and just the level of the execution of your work shows such an well, huge talent, but just the talent with technique, and that it's not something that just happens overnight. And so I also love everything that you said to encourage creatives as well to keep on their path, stay with their process, and to just keep doing what they do. And this couldn't be a better example, inspiring others to continue with their work. And it certainly inspires me. I haven't done anything creative for ages. I'm looking at all of this thinking, oh my goodness, how wonderful. So thank you so very much for taking the time to be interviewed today. And I really look forward to seeing what you do next, Mandarin. Thank you very, very much. Let's just
Thanks
come off
so
this
much,
for a second.
Anna.
I'm on stop share because I think we will have had, your images for considerable part of this interview, which is fine by me because it was really wonderful talking in detail about them. So yeah, all the very best, and hope to see you again if we ever get over to Australia again.
Oh,
Wonderful.
fingers crossed. I'm gonna have to, you know, bite the bullet now that I can travel and come and see you guys. Yeah. And look, fingers crossed. I would absolutely love to photograph you guys again. But you know, one thing that I've learned with music is you can hope, but just don't ever assume and expect. So it's my goal. I would love to. You guys are all such amazing humans and really damn talented. So yeah, we'll see.
I hope so. I hope that happens in the future. Anyway, keep in touch because if we come over, I'd definitely love to catch up and see what you're doing next. Wonderful.
Yeah.
All
right.
I'd
love to.
All the very best.
Well, stay well. Thanks
Great
so much, Anna.
Bye.
Okay. See ya. Bye.
Bye.